You wake up to the smell of smoke and rot. The air is thick, heavy with damp straw and sweat. You've slept on a bed of hay shared with strangers, and something just bit your leg. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Forget what fantasy films promised you. Knights shining in armor, castles glittering in sunlight, noble feasts under candlelight. That was the illusion of the elite. For everyone else, the medieval world was a battlefield for survival, a life where comfort didn't exist, where disease ruled, and where the simplest mistake could cost your life. Let's travel back to a time when every breath was a gamble and discover why you wouldn't last a single day in the Middle Ages. The reality of dinner. If you think skipping breakfast is hard, imagine living in a world where food wasn't a meal. It was a miracle. The average peasant didn't dine. They endured. Their diet revolved around something called pottage, a thin, ever-boiling stew made from whatever could be scraped from the ground: carrots, leeks, turnips, and when things got desperate, grass or tree bark. The pot never truly emptied. New scraps were just stirred into the old ones until flavor became a memory, and bread, the medieval symbol of life itself, often came with a price. Ground by hand with coarse millstones, the flour was filled with sand and stone dust. Every bite slowly wore down people's teeth until they crumbled in their jaws. Worse yet, the rye crops they depended on could turn poisonous. A fungus called ergot spread through damp fields, causing convulsions, burning sensations, and terrifying hallucinations. Whole villages fell sick, seeing demons and witches in the night, and people believed the devil had come for them. Now imagine being thirsty, really thirsty, but knowing that drinking water might kill you. In medieval Europe, clean water was almost impossible to find. Rivers were open sewers. Waste flowed freely through city streets, so people drank ale instead. Weak beer, brewed in nearly every home, was safer than water. Even children drank it, not to party, but to survive. Records suggest an adult might consume 8 pints a day, not out of indulgence, but necessity. Hydration in the Middle Ages meant living in a permanent buzz, and after all that ale, well, someone had to deal with the consequences. Picture this. You wake in the night, reach under your bed, and grab a small pot to relieve yourself. That pot is your toilet. And in the morning, you toss its contents out the nearest window. If you were polite, you shouted, "Garde l'eau," mind the water. But most didn't bother. The streets ran thick with filth. The stench was unimaginable. Even castles, those grand fortresses of power, weren't spared. Royal toilets, called garderobes, were simply holes built into the wall, dropping waste straight into the moat below, and someone had to clean all that up. The gong farmers, men who shoveled human waste by hand, worked at night and lived isolated lives. They earned high wages, but the smell never left them. It clung to their skin, their clothes, even their breath. Forget weekends, forget comfort. For most people, life meant endless work or starvation. Peasants rose with the sun and toiled until it vanished. They plowed fields, cut wood, hauled water. Their hands cracked, backs bent, and stomachs never full. The average farmer burned more calories in a day than a modern athlete, but food was so scarce, they barely replaced what they spent. Children joined the workforce early, sometimes as young as 7. They became apprentices, servants, or laborers, trading their childhood for a bowl of food and a corner to sleep in. Life expectancy? Barely 35 years. And that's if you avoided war, plague, or childbirth, each of which could end you just as easily. If you got sick, you didn't pray for medicine, you prayed for mercy. Doctors of the era had little understanding of disease. They believed in balancing humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. To heal you, they might drain your blood, apply leeches, or make you swallow crushed gemstones or mercury. The result? You'd leave weaker than when you arrived. Even a minor cut could turn fatal. Infection spread fast, and hospitals weren't centers of healing. They were waiting rooms for death. Then came the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, it wiped out nearly half of Europe. Bodies piled up faster than graves could be dug. The smell of death hung over entire kingdoms, and no one understood why. Some blamed sin, others blamed witches. Few realized the true culprit, a flea on a rat. You might think at least the law offered some order. It didn't. Medieval justice was brutal and absurd. You could be executed for theft, whipped for gossip, and branded for begging. Trials weren't about evidence, they were about faith. God was the judge, and your body was his courtroom. If you were accused, you might face the ordeal of water, tied and thrown into a river. If you floated, you were guilty, protected by the devil. If you sank, you were innocent, but drowned anyway. Or the ordeal of fire, carrying red-hot iron across your bare hands. If the burns healed in 3 days, you were cleared. If not, you faced execution. For the crowd, these were public spectacles, part punishment, part entertainment. People gathered, children watched, and vendors sold food at executions like it was a fair. In the Middle Ages, justice wasn't blind, it was bloodthirsty. And then there was war, not the noble battles of legend, but chaos, mud, and screams. Knights in polished armor made up the smallest fraction of armies. Most soldiers wore ragged leather and carried farming tools sharpened into weapons. Battles were short, savage, and catastrophic. At Towton in 1461, over 28,000 men died in a single day, the deadliest battle on English soil. Those who survived often died later, from infection, starvation, or wounds left untreated. For peasants, war meant burned fields, lost crops, and famine. When armies marched, they didn't just fight, they plundered, stole, and destroyed everything in their path. Daily life, the constant struggle. When the fighting stopped, life wasn't much better. Cities were overcrowded and filthy. Bathing was rare. Some people only did it twice a year. Many believed washing opened pores and let disease in. Homes were smoky, airless, and cold. Windows were covered with animal skins or oiled cloth. At night, entire families, parents, children, servants, shared one bed, often with strangers passing through. Lice and fleas were so common they had names for them. Clothes were rough and dirty, shoes were thin and rarely fit. And yet, through it all, people still sang, danced, and prayed, because to survive the Middle Ages, you didn't need comfort, you needed resilience. So next time you complain about slow Wi-Fi or a cold shower, remember, there was once a time when comfort itself was unthinkable. When your doctor might bleed you for a cough, your town stank of sewage, and the world could end with a single rat bite. The Middle Ages were brutal, but they built the foundation of everything we call civilization. Survival wasn't luck, it was an act of will. This was life before comfort, and somehow humanity endured. You're watching Medieval Uncovered. Subscribe to uncover the untold truths that shaped our world.